Hello, you're listening to Cheat Sheet, the podcast that gets you up to speed with everything you need to know on the day's news in just 10 minutes. I'm Sophy Ridge.
And I'm RidgeandFrost. It's Wednesday, the 14th of January, and this is what's happening today.
The US President Donald Trump has a message for Iranian protesters. Keep protesting. Help is on the way.
Another day, another U-turn from the government, this time on ID cards. There's a bit of nuance to it, though.
And there's an important meeting taking place in Washington about the future of Greenland. So the protests in Iran continue to be bloody, continue to have these extraordinarily brave people on the streets risking their lives, and the number of people killed, the estimated number, is just going up all the time. They're now saying 2,500 have been killed. That's just the estimation from the human rights activist news agency. It could be higher. 18,000 people arrested. And Donald Trump, this is the important thing, is now really wading in. He's promised those protesters that help is on the way, and he met with the Secretary of State to discuss this action, potentially, against Iran.
Yeah, and he's sort of hinted at help being on the way multiple times. He's increasingly explicit about it. And there are lots of reasons why these brave people are protesting. One of them will be because they believe help is in the way. Triggered, by the way, by the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities last June. But he needs to step up now, because these people bravely are dying, in part because of the belief that help is on the way. Of course, understandably, on the flip side, a lot of people are saying we shouldn't be involved in other people's affairs. We shouldn't be wishing for regime change. Look how it worked or failed to work in Iraq and Libya. So it's a tough one. The Home Secretary summoned and spoke to the Iranian ambassador in London yesterday. I mean, alas, clearly we are a bystander in this, but all of those important diplomatic considerations obviously ongoing on both sides of the Atlantic. But he said he's going to help them, and they're losing their lives in the meantime. Headlines today are another U-turn from the government, this time on ID cards. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so they're still having these digital ID cards, right? They still want them to be rolled out, but the emphasis now is going to be on, look, this is something that we should all want to do because we have more joined up access to public services. No one's going to be forced to have it. It's not going to be part of what you need to prove to get work. But the significant thing is that we were told that this was a big part of the government's strategy to crack down on illegal working. Keir Starmer was saying it was going to stop people slipping into the shadow economy. So I guess the question is, why have they changed their minds? And is that a bad thing? Because some people would say, look, you turning on something is a good thing. It shows you're listening to concerns. It shows you're nimble. But I guess the wider point that I would make is that this is a government who has fallen into a real habit of U-turning. 13 major U-turns, right, since they came to power. And I think the issue there is that it feels like you're a government that's effectively blowing in the wind. Where's your Lone Star? Where's your reforming zeal and your conviction that you're doing things for a strategy and for the right reasons? And I think that there is a bit of a risk that if you do want to position yourself as the change government, as the reforming government, you need to be able to stick to your convictions and, I guess, recognise that not everyone's going to agree with every reform that you do. And
obviously this also was something that they hadn't explicitly campaigned on, by the way, which is partly why it caused uproar. They're still coming, ID cards, digital ID cards in 2029, but as you said, they won't be compulsory when it comes to verifying your right to work, and they thought that making it mandatory was undermining public trust in it. What I just say, this broad argument, which has rumbled on for 30 years about government ID cards, the ideological argument against them remains as strong and legitimate as ever for those that believe in it. Oddly, the practical case for them is much stronger than it's ever been as well. So, whether you're talking about clamping down on illegal work or talking about stopping hacking or making sure age verification for online use. We talk about this the whole time, kids being exposed to too much online. All of that today, you'd be able to handle very, very effectively. You could probably clamp out all hacking if there was a digital ID system that companies had to employ. The other point for this ideological versus practical argument, essentially digital IDs already exist, but they're controlled by American tech companies. So there's an argument of just pure look where we are anyway. Is it uncomfortable ideologically? Yes. But is it even worse in the hands of US tech companies who we can't really regulate fully because they're not based here? So it's a really interesting one. And you go back to your point about how it was sold as partly to clamp down on illegal work, now one of the areas they're relaxing. It takes me back to Brexit. They sold this as it'll be bad for illegal workers. They should have sold it as this is how it will help your life and this is how it will be less ideologically damaging than in the hands of US tech companies.
So there's a bit of a row erupting stateside. This is the relationship between Bill and Hillary Clinton and the paedophile businessman Jeffrey Epstein, because both the Clintons say they're going to refuse to testify in public at this Republican-led investigation into the convicted sex offender. Others, it should be said, have only been asked to testify with written statements. They've written this letter shared on social media saying the process, in their words, is literally designed to result in our imprisonment and they will forcefully defend themselves. What's going on?
So obviously this is the House Oversight Committee investigation into all things Epstein related. It is Republican-led, but the Democrats on the committee also voted to subpoena him and his wife to testify. Others have also been subpoenas and not testified. So there's form there, but understandably, there's a lot of press focus on the fact that the former president hasn't done. So he's failed to show up. Next week, the committee will now vote if they want to hold him in contempt of Congress. So it's big news for a president if they get held in contempt of Congress. But even if they do, then the next step would be for the whole House, I think, then has to vote to approve that. And then it's a misdemeanor offense, not a felony, but huge headline, obviously, and an offense. It's not a grand jury or a DOJ investigation. It's a congressional one. Congressional ones do tend to get a bit political, but this topic is way above politics now. It's not a good look for the former president and his wife. Others are in a similar boat. And we should stress, as the chair of the committee says, President Clinton is not accused of any wrongdoing.
Bit of an update on Greenland. If you remember, the Danish ministers trying to pin down a meeting with the US officials, understandably, after President Trump said, he's just going to take control of their country. So, yeah, they're trying to get a meeting with the Americans, as you can imagine. And that is taking place today. To be a fly on that wall. So officials from Denmark and Greenland heading to the White House later to discuss what on earth is going on. They're going to meet the US Vice President, J.D. Vance. Often, pretty fiery in these meetings. So Lord knows what he's going to say. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
So we're awaiting a decision by the UK government as to whether to approve a new Chinese embassy at the former site of the Royal Mint in London. This has been rumbling on for a long time. The deadline is January the 20th, which, by the way, has been pushed back a few times. We are increasingly expecting a decision in the next couple of days rather than next week. And increasingly, I think, expecting it to be approved based purely on the fact that the Prime Minister is about to go to China. And it all comes as a sort of drumbeat of slightly more conciliatory relations with China, which I would say, by the way, the US is doing as well, despite very tough rhetoric. That phrase always comes back up as look at what I do, not what I say. President Trump is going to Beijing to meet with President Xi Jinping in April. A huge step. Starmer is expected to go before then. We don't have a date. So the expectation is that it will be approved. We don't know yet. And that is still causing a lot of concern, Sophie, for those China hawks that exist.
Yeah, it is. Look, there has been rumblings of unease on the Labour benches, on the Conservative benches. There's no decision that's been made yet. But look, as you say, right, Keir Starmer's going to go to China next month. So he's not going to do that if he's just about to, reject the embassy application. But it is causing concern. And also, the Telegraph too reporting today that actually the White House have raised some of these concerns as well. So I think they will have to come out with a pretty clear explanation over the next couple of days as to why they want to do it.
And we'll just add, the concern doesn't specifically center around giving them a big, beautiful new embassy in London. It's that because this former site of the Royal Mint, it is heavily on top of old communication cables that connect the City of London, and that there is a fear that the sort of critics of this decision, if it's approved, that China could hack into those cables, and that's the sort of main point why critics of approving this embassy are against it.
Well, that's it for today's cheat sheet. Of course, do subscribe, let us know what you think, and you can email us always, cheatsheet@sky.uk. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching.